Welcome to Retrospective Rewinds, where history unwinds and reveals its hidden what-ifs. Today, we embark on a thrilling journey, one that reimagines the tapestry of time itself. Imagine a world where Joan of Arc, the legendary Maid of Orleans, doesn't meet her tragic fate at the stake, but instead leads France to an era of unparalleled victory and transformation. How would her triumph reshape not only France, but the entire course of world history? Before we dive into this captivating alternate reality, be sure to hit the like button, share this journey through time with your friends, and subscribe to Retrospective Rewinds for more mesmerizing historical adventures. Now brace yourselves as we unravel a story of courage, intrigue, and the ripple effects of a single life that could have changed everything. This is not just history, it's history reimagined, and you won't want to miss a single beat of this extraordinary tale. Chapter 1: The Siege of Orleans. The city of Orleans, a jewel of France, now lay beleaguered under the shadow of English forces. The siege had stretched on, gnawing away at the hope and resolve of its defenders. But on this fateful day, a new figure emerged on the horizon: Joan of Arc, a young woman from Domremy, whose name was whispered like a prayer among the desperate troops. Joan rode through the gates, her eyes a piercing blue, reflecting a resolve that seemed to transcend her years. The soldiers, huddled behind the battered walls, watched her with a mix of awe and skepticism. Could this young maiden be the prophesied savior, the one spoken of in hushed tones and fervent prayers? In the dimly lit war room, Joan met the French commanders. Their eyes were weary, their faces etched with the fatigue of endless battle. She spread the maps before them, her fingers tracing the lines and contours of the land they were sworn to protect. The commanders exchanged glances. They had seen many plans come to naught against the English siege. Yet, there was something compelling about Joan's presence, an unshakable certainty that seemed to fill the room with a new kind of energy. As dawn broke, the French troops gathered, their armor clinking softly in the morning light. Joan, atop her white horse, raised her banner, a simple design that somehow captured the essence of their struggle. The sight of her, resolute and unyielding, ignited a spark within the weary soldiers. Whispers turned to shouts, and soon a chorus of determined voices rose against the morning sky. The battle that followed was unlike any other. Joan led the charge, her banner cutting through the fog of war. The English, so long the predators, now found themselves the prey. The French fought not just with sword and shield, but with a newfound vigor, as if each strike was guided by the hand of destiny. Amidst the chaos of clashing steel and shouted commands, Joan was everywhere, rallying the faltering, leading the charge, a beacon of hope in a sea of despair. As the sun reached its zenith, the English defenses crumbled. The French flag was hoisted high above Orleans, its colors bright against the smoke-filled sky. The siege was broken, and with it, the myth of English invincibility. The soldiers cheered, their voices echoing across the battlefield, but Joan's gaze was already set on the horizon. This victory was but the first step in a journey that would reshape the destiny of France. Chapter 2: The Coronation of Charles VII. The road to Rheims was fraught with peril. Assassins lurked in the shadows, and political intrigue threatened to unravel the fragile thread of hope that Joan had spun. Yet, she rode beside Charles VII, a protective presence, her unwavering faith a shield against the doubts that plagued him. Charles the Dauphin was a man caught between worlds. The crown that awaited him in Rheims was both a promise and a burden. He had watched his kingdom fracture under the weight of war and betrayal. But in Joan, he found an anchor, a conviction so pure it seemed to burn away the fog of uncertainty that had clouded his reign. As they journeyed, the landscape changed, but so too did the man who would be king. The whispers of doubt grew fainter with each mile traveled, replaced by a growing sense of purpose. Joan's words were not just of battle and strategy, but of a future, a France united and strong, a realm reborn from the ashes of conflict. Rheims Cathedral stood tall and proud, a testament to the enduring spirit of a nation. The coronation was a spectacle of color and music, a moment suspended in time. Nobles and commoners alike gathered, their eyes fixed on the young woman who had turned the tide of war. As Charles was anointed and crowned, a cheer rose from the crowd, a sound that carried the weight of history. In the days that followed, Joan and Charles outlined their vision for France. In the grand halls and quiet chambers, plans were made, alliances forged. The feudal lords, once unyielding in their autonomy, now bent their knee, swayed by the promise of a united nation under a just ruler. But amidst the celebrations, Joan's thoughts were elsewhere. She had challenged the might of England and had begun the task of unifying France. Yet, a greater challenge loomed, reshaping the very fabric of church and state. In the quiet corners of her mind, visions of a new order flickered, a future where faith and governance walked hand in hand, guided by the principles of justice and compassion. As the chapter closed on the coronation, a new one began. Joan, the Maid of Orleans, had set the wheels of change in motion. The path ahead was uncharted, fraught with challenges and uncertainties. But in her heart, she carried a flame that would light the way, not just for herself, but for all of France. Chapter 3: Unifying France. The dawn of a new day saw Joan of Arc leading her army to yet another battlefield. This time, it was more than just a fight against an external foe. It was a struggle to forge a unified France from the fractured fiefdoms. Each victory, each conquered castle, brought Joan closer to her vision of a nation bound not by fear and fealty, but by a shared purpose. Under the vast sky, the French countryside unfolded like a tapestry, each thread representing a different lord, a different allegiance. Joan, atop her steadfast steed, moved across this landscape with a determined grace. Her presence alone seemed to sway the balance of power, her convictions resonating with soldiers and civilians alike. Nightfall often found her seated by a campfire, surrounded by her men. In the flickering flames, they saw not just their leader, but a symbol of their collective hope. Her words, soft yet firm, spoke of a future where their children would grow up in a land free from the yoke of endless wars and petty squabbles of power. But not all were swayed by Joan's vision. In shadowed halls, whispers of dissent grew into plots of rebellion. Nobles, unaccustomed to bowing to the will of a king, much less a peasant girl, conspired to reclaim their waning power. Yet Joan, ever vigilant, confronted these challenges with a blend of iron resolve and diplomatic tact. Her words, sometimes a whisper, other times a storm, quelled the brewing unrest, her eyes never losing sight of the greater good. As the final stronghold fell, a sense of accomplishment filled the air. In the Grand Hall, a map of France lay spread out, now whole under a single rule. Joan and Charles stood side by side, their hands hovering over the map, not as conqueror and monarch, but as architects of a new era. The dream of a united France, once a distant star, now shone brightly in their grasp. Chapter 4: A New Church-State Dynamic. In the heart of France, a revolution of a different kind was brewing, a seismic shift in the age-old dance of church and state. Joan, with her divine visions and unshakable faith, stood at the center of this maelstrom. Her influence reached beyond the battlefield, challenging the very foundations of ecclesiastical power. The hallowed halls of the church, once unassailable bastions of spiritual authority, now echoed with debates and discussions sparked by Joan's unconventional spirituality. Her simple, direct faith contrasted sharply with the opulence and ritual that cloaked the church's hierarchy. In her presence, priests and bishops found themselves grappling with questions that pierced the heart of their doctrine. Amidst the throngs of people that gathered in the streets, Joan was a beacon of hope, a bridge between the divine and the ordinary. Her touch, her blessings, her mere glance seemed to uplift the souls around her. She walked among them not as a saint on a pedestal, but as one of their own, a shepherd guiding her flock towards a new dawn. In the royal council, where decisions of statecraft were weighed and measured, Joan's voice carried a different weight. She spoke of a nation where the church guided the hearts of its people, but did not dictate the affairs of state. Her words, steeped in a vision of justice and equity, challenged the old order, planting the seeds of a relationship where faith-inspired governance but did not control it. The chapter closed with Joan in a quiet chapel, her eyes closed in prayer. The visions that had guided her on the battlefield now painted pictures of a France where the church and the crown coexisted in harmony, each respecting the other's role in shaping a nation's destiny. It was a daring dream, a path fraught with resistance and peril. But in Joan's heart, the flame of this vision burned with an unquenchable fire, a beacon for the journey ahead. Chapter 5: England's Decline. The winds of change that Joan of Arc had stirred across the Channel now howled through the halls of English power. In the court of the English king, once resolute and unyielding, now reigned an air of uncertainty and despair. The news of Joan's victories and the unification of France had struck like a thunderbolt, shaking the very foundations of English ambition. In the countryside, the cost of the prolonged war began to show its cruel face. Villages, once thriving, now lay subdued under the weight of loss and poverty. Families mourned the absence of sons and fathers, while fields lay fallow, untended in the absence of their caretakers. The war, once a distant drumbeat, now throbbed in the heart of England, a constant reminder of the price of ambition. Amidst the hushed corridors of power, whispers of rebellion began to take shape. Nobles, long chafing under the king's rule, now saw in his weakened state an opportunity to reclaim their lost prominence. Secret meetings by candlelight, plots woven in the shadows, the fabric of English loyalty was fraying at the edges. In the ports, where English ships had once proudly set sail for conquest and glory, a different scene unfolded. Shipbuilders and sailors gathered, speaking in hushed tones of the dwindling resources, the uncertain future. The dreams of naval dominance, of a vast empire across the seas, seemed to drift away like mist on the water. As the king stood in his map room, his eyes tracing the lines that marked his diminishing realm, a sense of a bygone era weighed heavily upon him. The world was changing, and England, once a mighty architect of that change, now seemed like a spectator, watching as its place in the grand tapestry of nations was slowly, inexorably redrawn. Chapter 6: The Seeds of Renaissance and Reformation. In France, under the influence of Joan and the newfound unity, a different kind of revolution was blooming, one of thought, art, and expression. In the bustling universities and vibrant cafes of Paris, a new generation of thinkers and artists found their voices, fueled by the stability and inspiration Joan's victories had brought. Painters and sculptors, their hands and minds set free by the winds of change, began to create works that reflected the nation's renewed spirit. The canvas and marble told stories of struggle, of triumph, and of the simple peasant girl who had become the heart of a nation. Their art was a vibrant thread in the fabric of the French Renaissance, weaving a narrative of hope and resurgence. In the realm of the written word, poets and writers found their muse in the events that had reshaped their land. The tales of Joan, her faith, her battles, her vision for France flowed from their quills. The bookshops and public squares buzzed with the recitation of these new works, a literary revival that echoed the nation's rebirth. The church, too, felt the ripples of this cultural awakening. The reformers, emboldened by Joan's example, began to question the long-held doctrines and practices. In hushed meetings and public debates, they spoke of a faith that was more personal, more direct, a faith that spoke to the hearts of the people rather than dictating from the lofty heights of the church's hierarchy. As the first printing presses began their work in France, the words of change found a new and rapid means of travel. Pamphlets and books, carrying the ideas of the Renaissance and the seeds of Reformation, spread across the land. A new philosophical era was dawning, one where the human experience, enlightened by Joan's legacy, sought to understand and reshape the world in its own image. Chapter 7: A Different Age of Exploration. As the unified France basked in the glory of newfound stability and power, its gaze turned outward, towards the vast and uncharted waters of the world. French shipyards, once quiet, now buzzed with activity. Skilled craftsmen and seasoned sailors worked side by side, forging vessels that would carry the tricolor to unknown lands. On the day of the first major voyage, the air at the port was electric with anticipation. Crowds gathered to witness the departure, their eyes alight with the promise of discovery. As the ships unfurled their sails and set course into the horizon, it marked the beginning of a new chapter in the age of exploration, one dominated by French ambition and bravery. In lands far from Europe, the French explorers encountered worlds they could scarcely have imagined. Verdant jungles, arid deserts, and cultures rich in their diversity opened up before them. Each encounter, each new land claimed under the French flag, was a testament to the nation's growing ambition and reach. Back in the royal court of France, maps of the world were spread out, the boundaries of known lands expanding with each new report from the explorers. Plots and strategies were laid out, not just for exploration, but for colonization and the establishment of trade routes. France was no longer just a European power, it was becoming a global one. The establishment of the first French colony was both a challenge and a triumph. Settlers, soldiers, and missionaries worked to build a new French outpost, their efforts a microcosm of the nation's global aspirations. The colony, with its blend of French culture and local traditions, became a symbol of France's growing influence and a testament to the far-reaching impact of Joan's unification of her homeland. Chapter 8: The Rise of French Hegemony. With a unified nation and colonies abroad, France emerged as the preeminent power in Europe. Its influence extended beyond its borders, shaping the politics, culture, and economy of the continent. The royal court of France, once a battleground of feudal interests, now played host to diplomats and envoys from across Europe seeking alliances and favor. The cultural dominance of France became evident in the courts of Europe. French fashion, art, and language set the standard for sophistication and elegance. The very mannerisms and etiquette of the French court became sought-after markers of refinement and status among European nobility. Economically, France prospered like never before. The wealth flowing in from its colonies and the trade routes established by its daring explorers filled the royal coffers and fueled a period of unprecedented growth. Innovations in trade and finance, spurred by this influx of wealth, further cemented France's position as an economic powerhouse. The military might of France, too, was unmatched. The discipline and valor of its troops, honed under Joan's leadership, now served as a deterrent to potential adversaries. A grand military parade in Paris, showcasing the nation's advanced weaponry and disciplined soldiers, was a clear message to the world. France was not only a cultural and economic leader, but also a formidable military power. At the heart of this new European order was France, its policies and decisions shaping the future of the continent. The French model of governance, influenced by Joan's vision of a just and unified nation, was emulated by others, marking the establishment of a new era in European history, an era of French hegemony. Chapter 9: Joan, the National Icon. In the years following her triumphs, Joan of Arc transcended her role as a military leader, becoming a symbol of national unity and strength. Across France, her image was revered, not just as a figure of the past, but as an ever-present guiding force. From grand statues in public squares to humble paintings in peasant homes, her likeness served as a constant reminder of the unity and resilience she had instilled in the nation. Joan's return to her homeland was marked by celebrations that swept across the cities and villages. People from all walks of life gathered to catch a glimpse of the Maid of Orleans, whose name had become synonymous with French glory. As she rode through the streets, the cheers and adulation of the crowds were not just for what she had done, but for what she represented, a France reborn from the ashes of war and division. In the years that followed, Joan's influence permeated every aspect of French society. She spoke at public gatherings, her words resonating with a deep sense of hope and solidarity. Her speeches, filled with visions of a prosperous and united France, further cemented her place in the hearts of the people. She was not just a hero of the past, she was a living legend, a beacon guiding the nation toward a brighter future. Even as Joan aged, her legacy remained undimmed. The tales of her bravery and faith continued to inspire new generations. Her story was not just a chapter in history books, it was a living narrative, a wellspring of national pride that continued to shape the identity and aspirations of the French people. As she looked out over the land she had helped forge, Joan's thoughts were not of battles won or enemies vanquished, but of the enduring spirit of her people. Her legacy was not carved in stone or written on parchment. It was etched in the heart of a nation that continued to thrive under the ideals she had championed. Chapter 10: A Cultural Flourishing. In the wake of Joan's unifying influence, France experienced a cultural renaissance unlike any other. The stability and prosperity brought about by her victories created fertile ground for a flourishing of the arts and sciences. Paris, the heart of this cultural explosion, became a beacon of creativity and innovation, drawing thinkers, artists, and writers from all over Europe. The French Renaissance, inspired by Joan's spirit, took on a unique character. Painters and sculptors created works that blended traditional French themes with the ethos of Joan's era. These pieces were more than mere art. They were visual narratives of a nation's journey, reflections of the collective soul of France. Literature saw a golden age, with poets and playwrights drawing upon Joan's legacy for inspiration. The tales of her life and the transformation of France under her influence became common themes, explored in works that ranged from grand epics to intimate sonnets. This literary revival was not just an artistic endeavor. It was a celebration of the nation's identity and heritage. The performing arts, too, saw a resurgence. Theaters and opera houses across France showcased productions that told Joan's story, intertwining history with artistry. These performances were more than entertainment. They were communal experiences, shared reflections on the nation's past and present. Education in France underwent a transformation as well. Influenced by Joan's ideals, new academies and universities emphasized critical thinking and national history. This shift in educational focus aimed to cultivate not just knowledgeable citizens, but also enlightened individuals who were deeply connected to their national identity and heritage. As France basked in this era of cultural vibrancy, the impact of Joan's legacy was unmistakable. It was a legacy that transcended her military achievements, one that had ignited the minds and hearts of a nation, fostering an environment where creativity and innovation thrived. Chapter 11: Global Shifts. As France ascended to the zenith of its power, the ripples of its influence extended far beyond the European continent. French explorers, emboldened by their nation's newfound glory, ventured to distant lands, weaving a tapestry of colonial ambition and cultural exchange. The maps in the royal chambers of France were no longer static representations of known worlds. They were dynamic, ever-expanding testimonies of a nation reaching across the globe. In these new lands, the French flag was planted, symbolizing not just claims of territory, but the dawn of complex relationships. Colonies sprang up, each a fusion of French ideals and local customs, creating a mosaic of cultural interactions. These encounters were not without conflict and struggle, yet they also brought about unprecedented exchanges of knowledge, art, and traditions. Back in Europe, French diplomacy took on a sophisticated and strategic character. The nation, once an insular kingdom, now played a pivotal role in international affairs. French diplomats, fluent in the art of negotiation and alliance building, became key figures in the delicate balance of global politics. The Enlightenment, with its roots deep in French soil, began to spread its branches across the world. Ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity, which had found fertile ground in Joan's France, inspired philosophers and revolutionaries far and wide. The flame of enlightenment, once a flicker in the heart of France, now illuminated minds across continents. As the chapter closed, it became clear that France's impact on the world stage was not a fleeting moment in history, but a profound shift in the narrative of civilizations. The legacy of Joan of Arc, once confined to the battlefields of France, had become a global phenomenon, shaping the course of nations and the destiny of peoples. Chapter 12: The Modern Beacon. In the contemporary era, The legacy of Joan of Arc continued to resonate through the streets, institutions, and culture of France. Modern France, a blend of historic grandeur and innovation, stood as a testament to the enduring spirit of the Maid of Orleans. Her ideals, once revolutionary, now formed the bedrock of a nation that prided itself on its democratic values, cultural richness, and global leadership. Throughout the nation, monuments and museums dedicated to Joan and her era served as constant reminders of her impact. Her story, a blend of myth and history, continued to inspire and educate. It was a narrative that transcended time, a source of national pride that connected the past with the present. On the world stage, France, shaped by Joan's legacy, emerged as a champion of human rights, environmental stewardship, and diplomatic leadership. The nation's policies and initiatives reflected a commitment to the ideals that Joan had embodied: courage, justice, and a relentless pursuit of a better world. In fields of technology and science, France stood at the forefront, its innovations and discoveries fueled by a spirit of inquiry and ambition. The nation's progress in these areas was a reflection of its broader quest for enlightenment, a quest that Joan of Arc, in her own way, had initiated centuries ago. As the story of Joan of Arc and her transformed France concluded, it was clear that her influence would continue to reverberate through the ages. Her life, once bound by the limitations of her time, had become a timeless emblem of resilience, unity, and progress. Joan of Arc, a figure of the past, continued to light the way for the future, her legacy a beacon for generations to come.